Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host. Excited to have Darcy Weir on once again. He's got a new docuseries out, Pascagoula, and I watched the first episode of that. I loved it, and so I'll be talking to him in just a few minutes. I want to thank everyone that supports the show, and if you would like to listen to the audio commercial free, you can always support the show for $3 or more a month over at Patreon. And that link's right on our website, podcastufo.com. You can always watch it live Tuesday nights on Facebook, YouTube, and other platforms right here at 7 o'clock every Tuesday night, live, commercial free, of course. And you can also participate in the chat room like so many people do. Speaking of that, this is a pre-recorded show. I generally am live, but I'm going to be away from phone and internet while this is aired. So unfortunately, I won't be able to check in. But I do all my pre-recorded shows just as if they were live. I don't edit them. I just do them and put them up. And that's what we're going to do tonight. Before I get going with Darcy, I just want to play the trailer. And this is for the upcoming available. It's available now. The Pascagoula show, the docuseries part 1 is. Here's the trailer for that whole series right here.
Normal fear is something that you expect, you know, sure. But this was something that wasn't supposed to even exist.
Pascagoula 73 is the case we should be concentrating on. It's almost perfect. 2 witnesses, interviews at the sheriff, interviews at the Air Force base.
But it appeared to me that it was about 30 or 40 foot long and maybe 8 or 10 foot high.
Lots of other sightings, things seen in the river, other witnesses who were on the opposite side of the river that night.
I even asked that to him before he died. I said, do you remember me saying there's somebody out there I can feel? And he said, yes, I do. And he said, I lied about that. I did see what they said, what you see, but I didn't want people to think I was crazy.
And on we go. It even made its way into popular culture. Even Walter Cronkite covered the story.
For weeks now, there have been reports of UFO sightings in many parts of the country, but especially the Gulf Coast.
One newspaper put a sketch of a supposed extraterrestrial visitor on the front page.
His abduction and other people as well, coming forward saying, I saw this, that, and the other.
I don't know what it was. I know it wasn't a plane or a helicopter.
So I opened the door after a few seconds to step out to see if I could really tell what it was, and it just took off.
And the case just took off from there.
Calvin Parker, I was questioning him, and at one time he wanted to climb the wall. That's how nervous and how shook up he was. And then the examiner, he began to wonder himself. So he ran the third test, and he believed just what Mr. Hickson had told him.
So you would believe them then? Oh yes, there's no doubt whatsoever that they were telling the truth.
The sheriff who was involved, Sheriff Fred Diamond, 2 nights later had his own UFO sighting.
These things weren't beings, they were robots.
Yeah.
But I believe the beings that has contacted me since then was the beings that were controlling these robots.
If his fantasies are fact, it is the greatest threat to the well-being of the people of this nation.
I think they'd had a drink. That's just what I think about it.
Well, they didn't have a drink. But anyway, welcome to the show, Darcy.
Hey, good to see you. Thanks for having me on again, Dan.
Yeah. Now, I got to tell you that was great. I really enjoyed, part 1 because, well, I'll get into that more. But, Charles Hickson, to hear his side of it, that was the part I was lacking. And so that was really great. Great animations. You did a really good job. But let's, for the person, and I always have to look at it this way, and hopefully you'll agree with me, but there's new people paying attention to this topic all the time. So a lot of people don't know about the Pascagoula incident, which happened, I believe, October 11th, 1973. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So let's just do a nutshell about the whole thing.
Nutshell, state of Mississippi. It's nighttime, October 11th, 1973. We're in the 70s, the groovy, just post-hippie era. And Calvin Parker, who's 19 years old, was working with a friend at a shipyard
on the Pascagoula River in Mississippi. His friend, Charlie Hickson, is 42 years old. They decided after work to go fishing on the river. And Calvin just bought a brand new car. I believe it was a Rambler. Nice, sporty car. He was looking forward to driving out and going for this little fishing expedition with his older friend. Calvin had just gotten this job actually at the shipyard because of Charlie Hickson. Charlie is friends with Calvin's dad. They're of the same age. And that's how they know each other. And so they're fishing that night and having a chat. And all of a sudden, they see this blue light sort of emanating from behind them. I think they see something at a distance at first, and then it's right up on them. And when they turn around, there's 3 beings that appear to be hovering or floating down to them from the craft. They can't see that well because it's so bright. And they're picked up by these beings, taken aboard this craft, and they're abducted. And they both have their own sort of story regarding this abduction, their own experiences. And we did this series, Pascagoula 73, in a 4-part treatment. So the first episode is Charlie Hickson's experience. The second episode is Calvin Parker's. The third is Maria and Jerry Blair, which are these other witnesses that say they were abducted across the same river that night. And the fourth episode is kind of a bit of a biography on Philip Mantle, the narrator of the whole story, and how this British lad got involved with a Mississippi abduction case.
Yeah. So I gotta tell you, I actually have a little bit of a part in this, and not that I need to brag or anything or pat myself in the back, but I connected Calvin with Philip. I don't know if he happened to mention that, but what happened was, this is really, I think it's a fun story. I had this show since 2011. I think it was 2012 or 13. I had a listener, that a very smart guy named Michael Lauk. And he said he wanted to write some blogs for me. And he would be like doing UFO news, and he was a great guy, really sharp. We had a really good rapport. So anyway, he writes this blog about the Pascagoula incident. Now, Calvin Parker was nowhere to be seen for about 25 to 30 years, something like that.
Yeah.
He was not doing any interviews or anything. Mm-hmm. So one day I get this email from I look at the email, and it's gone fishing something at AOL, and so I get this email, and it says, he says, I really liked your story on the Pascagoula. It's very, very well done, very accurate. And then he signs it Calvin Parker. So I said, right back, I said, this isn't the Calvin Parker, is it? And he writes back, yes. I said, may I have your number? Can we talk? So I talked to him, and great guy. I mean, what a nice gentleman. So,
really down to earth, good guy.
Yeah. So I said, hey, would you be opposed to actually letting me interview you? I know you haven't done one for years and years. And he said, sure. So he came on the show. And I'm going to tell you a really nice little tidbit. I've told this on this story before, but he was on my show and really enjoyed. And I'll get to the Philip Mantle thing, but just a second. One of the great things of me doing this show was what happened next. And I did the show with him. Again, he was out of the public eye for a long time. So I get this email, and it's someone saying, hi there, I've been looking for Calvin for a long time. I wondered if you wouldn't mind, forwarding the connection. So I said, sure. So I forwarded the connection to Calvin. I said, this is someone, they wanted me to forward this email to you. And so he calls me up and he goes, that's my estranged daughter. He said, This is the most wonderful thing. He says, we're talking every day. They're saying we love each other. And, it was like such a wonderful thing that they got connected. So I thought that was a really great thing of me doing this. That was one of the pleasures of doing the show that I can look back at and say,
that's amazing.
It happened. So I
What
got
a
to meet
story.
Calvin and hang with him and stuff like that. But anyway, so Calvin he says, I've been kind of working on this book about this thing you have, really. And so then one day I'm on Facebook and I see Philip Mantle and he says, does anyone know how to get a hold of Calvin Parker? I'm thinking about a book with Calvin Parker. So I said, hey, Philip, yeah, I know how to get a hold of him. And so I connected the two together, and the rest is history with Philip. And every time I have Philip on, he thanks me for that connection, and done a lot with it. So we should say to the listener and the people watching, you have some construction noise going on. You can't help it. You have some carpenters there doing some work. So, so when you hear strange noises, it's not aliens.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm living in some dust right now, but that's really interesting. And so we all have you to thank for this docuseries then, because
he probably would have come out. He probably would have, he was ready to talk about it. So
I know. But I'm just saying.
I mean, the connection with Philip, the whole thing. I'm so glad it worked out like it did.
Yeah. So Philip's written, I think, like 3 books on this case now.
Yeah.
And he's very well versed, knows all these different witnesses that have come forward since. And some of them he had to track down, that they didn't even willingly want to come forward. So that brings a bit more credibility to them. But the way I got involved with this film was because Philip reached out to me, so he just kind of put together the pieces that, this guy seems to be able to make documentaries. And he emailed me and said, hey, we should talk sometime. I think you could do a really cool documentary on the Pascagoula incident. And at first it was supposed to be just like one feature-length doc, but once he shared with me all of this stuff, he got these hypnosis sessions done of Calvin Parker and Maria Blair. And he was like, I want those to be just like the whole hypnosis session. So I was like, I can't really just make a documentary just watching somebody lying down talking. But then I realized, you know what? I should do it like this. The first episode will be all Charlie Hickson's story. The second one will be Calvin Parker lying down talking, because it's his hypnosis session and his perspective. And background on how he was over the decades. The third will be a lying down of Maria Blair. And then the fourth will be just like, who's this guy? Philip Mantle, which a lot of people know who he is.
Yeah.
But I make my documentaries for everybody. So it's kind of like, if you don't know who he is, this is who he is.
Yeah. I had Philip scheduled for the show, and, he had that health issues. He seems to be doing better right now.
Yeah.
But there was a pretty big scare there.
You should have him on. I know that he's starting to open up to like 30-minute interviews now. So maybe he can get that up to an hour when his health improves a bit better.
Yeah. Yeah. I am quite booked up, but I will try to fit him in at some point. But anyway, I just want to talk about episode 1 because I had heard that Charlie was very active out there and talking about this, and Calvin was, reserved basically, in the beginning. But I had no idea he was talking as much as he did that you portrayed in this film. And I love the vintage little TV vintage thing. That was brilliant. But it's very, very fun to watch. And really, I was watching with my producer / better part, Donna, and I were sitting there watching, and we're saying, how can you not believe this guy? Mm-hmm. I mean, he's just so, he's such a credible person. You can't see any, red flags at all when he's talking about it. I mean, it is bizarre. It's a bizarre case, and I know you did mention that, they both seem to have different kind of experiences on board. And one of them, I know that, Calvin talked about like a female type figure. And Calvin did not see the carrot-like protruding. He doesn't remember the carrot-like protruding from what may be the robot type things that came and got them. Charlie remembers them. But when I spoke to Calvin, he said he didn't really remember those features.
He didn't remember spikes coming out of their heads?
That's what Calvin told me, unless he told you something else. But when I interviewed him, he says he just didn't remember that part.
He remembered that they had that like gray, wrinkly skin.
Yeah.
And that they were robotic in nature and they were hovering.
Yeah.
They had like those kind of like pincer type hands.
Right.
So I think it was like, 75% and of the same sort of type that Charlie would have remembered. But Charlie, yeah, he was the one that said spikes for sure.
And, I think the best part of this case is the part where they snuck the tape recorder in the drawer of the desk and were taping them when they were left alone. I mean, if you have any doubts about this case and then you listen to that, and it's a terrible recording. I've tried to listen to it over the years and I don't know if it could ever be cleaned up, but
I enhanced it though.
Yeah, it sounded better in your film. I get it. It did, definitely did.
It's going to sound, in my opinion. Like I ran it through a pretty good process to bring it up, and then we subtitled the whole thing. So,
but I mean, they talk about like it really happening. I mean, if they were putting on a hoax, why would they do that when they're alone, sitting there alone? It gives 100% credibility, in my opinion, to this particular case, which is fantastic. It's a fantastic case. But I got to tell you, Maria Blair, is that her name? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
I had no idea that I knew that there was a witness, and I don't know if I heard her name, but I had no idea that she was actually claims that she was abducted too.
So that third episode is all dedicated to her story. Apparently her and her husband, Jerry, the same night, October 11th, 1973, they were on a pier just opposed to Calvin and Charlie across the river, and she was supposed to be going with him to say goodbye to him. They were newlyweds, and they were supposed to say bye, and he was going to jump on a fishing trawler with a captain and go away for a few days of work. And they got abducted, or she got abducted for sure. She says that in her sort of telling of this whole story, she thinks that he was being abducted for a while and she was abducted too. And it's pretty wild, pretty incredible. Her daughter reached out to me after the documentary came out, and she's added me to Facebook as a friend, and we've I've said thank you for your story, and Philip shared all this stuff with me. I hope you guys enjoyed the film series. So it's pretty wild. Abductions seem to be a thing, and I believe this case is real. I believe that something happened that night, that there's just so many witnesses that we can point to at least definitely UFO activity in the sky, right?
Yeah, right.
Not just Calvin Parker and Charlie Hickson's story, but then that's like, whoa, that's like the big abduction story that people should hear more about. So that's what I think we accomplished here by providing all this testimony and bringing up the documents and showing all the, coverage of it. J. Allen Hynek came forward.
And he thought that was a pretty solid case.
He did.
Yeah.
He proclaimed that, and this is post Project Blue Book, where he was saying everything is prosaic, right? And then you've got James Harder, who came forward, and there's a lot of really interesting people linked to this case. So I think we did a pretty good representation.
I do, so far.
Thank you.
Episode 1. And, I mean, here's the thing that I could see while watching your film that I didn't really know the full story. And that is that the people involved were taking it seriously. It didn't seem like a lot of ridicule or anything like that, besides the 2 cleaning ladies that were in the newspaper. But everyone else seemed to, like the military, everyone was taking this thing really seriously as far as, the testing.
There were other people, I mean, like Philip J. Class, he took his usual stance. And
oh, yeah. Yeah, that's to be expected. Yeah.
There's other skeptics and debunkers. There were people that wrote about, can't remember their names. It's in the documentary, but there's one guy that said that they actually were kidnapped by Russians that came out of a sub on the river.
Which is so ridiculous.
And another one said that they were both suffering from 2 separate mental conditions, like
That's
psychological
right.
conditions,
Yeah.
to account for their story. I mean,
I understand being skeptical, but when you're trying to debunk and use crazy things, those are all things that have to be based on some type of fear element. Like, this can't be true, so we just have to make this fit somehow. And that's it's pure debunkery that is silly. Like that was the planet Venus, or something like that. I mean, sometimes it is the planet Venus, but in this particular case, it's just the blue light. And I remember him saying, like, it was a welder's arc. It was so bright, coming out of them when the door opened, that type of thing. And, and they, when you listen to that recording, they were scared. Calvin was really scared, through this whole thing, and I mean, really impacted their life. And and a lot of things, I heard people say things like, well, Calvin's a simple man and all that. He wasn't a simple man. I don't know if you know this, but he had a major construction company with lots of people working for him. He did airport infrastructure all over the country, and did very well. He was a smart man, a smart businessman too, and a great time. I had a lovely time with him and Wynette in Arizona. We spent a lot of time together, and great gentleman, really nice guy, and not a simple man like people try to portray him as. He was funny as hell. He could be so funny.
Yeah. Phil imparted some of that, humor to me. He said, it was the damnedest thing. I was hired, fired, and abducted in the same day.
Yeah, that would be something he'd say. Yeah. But yeah, so that's quite a case. And, I mean, you think of, how here these people are living their lives. Maybe it is kind of a simple life, going fishing. And boy, did Calvin ever like to fish right up until the end. He loved fishing. But, someone's life can just change instantly. We all have these situations where our life takes a path and something, falls in our lap type of thing. But, I mean, just think of how much that changed their lives. People try to get on with their lives and do other things like Calvin, I mentioned. But eventually, he wanted to talk about it. And I'm glad he did.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Otherwise, this docuseries wouldn't have been made.
For one thing. So yeah, and I was really glad to see Philip in it, and yeah, he's really into it and well versed. And one of the things that you have in this series, episode 1, is when they found all those documents, Charlie's documents, which is really amazing. You know, think about that alone. Someone buys a house that used to belong to him. There's boxes of letters. They don't throw it away. That's like 99% of the people that would buy a house with, you know, boxes of paper and letters is, you know, destroy them, throw them away, get them out of there, you know, go to the dump with them. And they had all these great documents, which is really quite awesome.
Yeah. And that was all recovered, I think, by Chelsea Norton Prince, who I actually connected with when the film got released. She helped the Mississippi Times, like a local newspaper in Pascagoula, run the story about the film being out and such. She's a really cool person and, you know, connected to this story. So she was poring over those letters and stuff with Charlie's son, now an elderly man.
Right. And he was wasn't he? He learned overseas. He was in the military. And he learned not from his father what happened. He learned
in a magazine that I think was called like Stars and Stripes or something, like some kind of military magazine, that his father was abducted because he was in service. So that's quite the way to learn, right?
Yeah, I wonder what he thought at first. Yeah.
Probably what a lot of people thought, right? No way.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fantastic story if you really think about it. But, you know, it's just one of these that even as fantastic as it is, it's a very credible story. You know, I mean, it's one of, you know, it's on the chart of one of the top stories. And, you know, with all these other people coming forward about it too, which always happens. You know, you talk about your series being out, and when the book came out and stuff like that, then, you know, it gets, you know, he had that plaque made in Pascagoula that they put up in, you know, in the park there for him. I remember when that was done. But these things, when they get out there, then more and more people, well, I didn't really want to talk about it, but maybe I will, you know, that's what seems to happen in these cases, which is great.
Totally.
Yeah. So what are some of the more amazing things that you learned while you were doing this series that you didn't have any idea about?
I mean,
here go the aliens again.
Yeah, they're trying to get through the roof to get me. Yeah. I think the fact that there was just all these witnesses that had seen the objects either nights before, nights after, months after. Like there was even a USO encounter between the Coast Guard and one of these blue objects in the river.
Wow.
You know, the Navy got involved with this phenomenon happening. So I think there was a UFO flap going on in the Mississippi area at the time. And all of this was kind of like culminating with the abduction story. So, yeah, I think I had no idea that the story went that deep. And I'll say that I've been like interested in the whole UFO phenomenon for at least 20 years now, right? Longer than that. I probably was a teenager when I started opening my mind up to this stuff, being like, oh, this is cool. Thought maybe it was science fiction at first. But in university, realized, oh, wow, there's actually layers of truth to this. Like, are we not alone? And the Pascagoula case was one that I had heard about early on. I was like, oh, these two guys from Mississippi just having fishing at night got abducted. And it was just such a pleasure to have that story eventually become part of my filmmaking career and learn so much more, learn so many details about it.
So what was the type of travel that you did for this? You obviously went to see Phil.
Yeah. So I went out to the UK in November of 2023 and spent a week there shooting, and then I came back, and a lot of the footage that he supplied me was footage that he had gotten recorded remotely. And it's just been over a year of editing, and music and animation and all the stuff that goes into making these feature-length films that I do.
And I got to tell you, your artists that do the animation, very talented, very nice.
Thank you.
I like the sort of vintagey look to it. The whole thing just works really well.
Yeah, every episode has a little bit something different, kind of like evolves with the characters that tell the story and the decade that it's being told in. So yeah.
And what year did Charlie pass? Do you have any idea, approximately?
That's, I want to say 2 or 4 years ago. Like maybe it was 2020 or 2021. I'm not quite sure.
I'm not talking about Calvin. I'm talking about Charlie.
Oh, you're talking about Charlie.
Yeah, Calvin was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, a couple of years ago for Calvin. I'm not quite sure for Charlie.
Charlie it was quite a few years ago.
It was probably like early 2000s.
Yeah, but well, what I'm getting at is I don't know how long. There was an interview, a clip that you had where he was fairly elderly at the time. So so he had talked about it, I would say probably close to the end, where he was still out there talking about it. One of the things you can't really understand because you can't ask when these people are gone, but I'd like to hear what type of ridicule, if any, did he suffer from? A lot of ridicule, because that's such a crazy sounding story. It didn't seem, if it's so, it didn't seem to bother him because he just kept on about it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think he was just like a rock. He just let everything roll off of him,
Yeah.
He wasn't very affected by it. I think Calvin was more of the emotional person about the story, right?
Absolutely.
He didn't want to be very tied to it till he was much older, like you said. Then he was ready to come forward, and he was at peace with it.
Right. Going off on a little bit of a, I don't know, sideline here, but it makes you wonder if these type of things have been happening for centuries, possibly. I mean, we have no way of knowing. There's no real accounts of them going back, but I know there is an abduction account in the 1920s. There was something that was very, similar, but how far back? But I mean, you could imagine that people wouldn't want to talk about it, like if it did happen,
Oh yeah, there's a major stigma. There's a
right?
huge stigma regarding this phenomenon.
But they wouldn't even know what it would be. You know what I mean? Like 100 years ago or 200 years ago, or whatever. I don't think it come to their mind that it was people from another place. I mean, you hear of these things of, leprechauns and, ghouls and things like that. Maybe it's all
connected,
connected somehow.
Maybe. I know that there's thousands, if not millions, of people that have possibly been subjected to the abduction phenomenon. So there's two things I think David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins, they did a Roper poll, and they surmised through that study that just in the United States, probably about 2 million people have experienced something like an abduction phenomenon.
And some of that can be, of course, explained in other ways.
Of course.
But there's a percentage of it that, that has to have some credibility to it.
Yeah. What if, a percentage of that is real? And then the other thing, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, former Apollo astronaut, Apollo 14 astronaut, and was also, integral to many of the earlier and later missions at Capcom. He set up the Edgar Mitchell Research Foundation.
Yep.
And in 2022, they published a paper called the Free Study, Foundational Foundation for Research of Extraordinary or Extraterrestrial Extraordinary Claims, or something like that. And that had over 3,000 individuals who said that they had some kind of contact type experiences with a non-human intelligence. So it's definitely not just Calvin and Charlie Hickson, is what I'm trying to say.
So I want to move on to something called Dark Alliance. But before we do that, I just want to talk about one thing really quickly, because I'd never heard of this. But Charlie Hickson says he had communication with some beings, and he had that little rock in his. I thought that was pretty. He talked about this little rock that would heat up, and he knew that something was coming when the rock would heat up. And someone said, "Well, what type of rock it is?" And he reached right in his pocket. He said, "I always have it with me, and here it is." And I'm just wondering if anyone ever did anything with that rock.
I don't know.
Yeah. That was crazy.
Something, when I was digging through the archival of all the things he was saying and giving testimony to regarding this anomalous phenomenon, I found that pretty interesting, and I didn't want to leave it out.
If
somebody
it was great.
If that rock's kicking around, somebody toss it my way.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm going to play the trailer for this next film. We're going to be talking about Dark Alliance, and we have about 20 minutes left, so I know we can get into it pretty well in 20 minutes. And here we go. Here's the trailer.
Gaia and the cyberstalkers are the dark forces.
All right, so my clients are not the dark forces?
No.
But I would say to those of you that are supporting him and helping him to defend himself, what's he defending himself from? Who is the dark side? Because, see, if you really look at it and dissect it, no one is suing Corey. He's the one suing everybody. Nobody's suing him. Who is the dark force? Who is the cabal?
Yeah, the cabal.
He said things like I couldn't believe, to be honest with you. He told me he was talking about 20 and back and bases on Mars and the moon and all this. Although none of that was in his book. I do believe that there was a information contamination.
I was contacted by Roger Ramsor, Roger Richards, who at the time was Corey Good's business partner, manager, something to that effect. I believe he contacted me in about March 2017. I think if you look up sensational in the dictionary, you'll probably find David Wilcock's face in there. Because it is kind of like a cult tactics, cult-like behaviors that are going on around that group.
So I called Corey and I said, Corey, I'm calling on behalf of David. How much of a percentage is David going to get? Corey said to me, I'm not giving David a percentage.
Corey literally called himself the Enoch of our modern times, and David claims to have all these insiders, and they prop themselves up to be these larger-than-life personalities.
Hundreds of people have been on Gaia, having different TV shows and different personalities. Have any of them turned around and sued Gaia? Nobody but Corey Good.
David is going to lead a conversation.
Raise our glasses to Bill William Hopkins.
Love you, Bill.
He told me, I forget the name of the company that created the Skynet in the Terminator films. He said he started Cyberdyne years before the Terminator film came out.
Let's go back to the beginning. I first met Corey and David. Well, let me back up a little bit from there. So
Well, there you go. So I've said many times, there's so many really amazing things that have happened and are happening that there's no need to, make things up, so to speak, or make it more dramatic than it really is. And it's kind of the case with these people. And I heard someone say like a cult following, and that's what I remember when the whole lawsuit thing happened and all that, and getting contacted from someone and them saying, "Are you watching what's going on?" I said, "No, I don't follow those people in particular." But he said, "Do you have any idea how crazy all those people are and their claims and everything?" I said, "No, I just don't. I don't follow it."
Was it Dave Altman that reached out to you?
It was Dave Altman.
He reached out to me too after he saw the doc and was like, "Oh, I didn't know you did this." I didn't know that he was following that story too. Sometimes great minds think alike.
Yeah. So let's. How did you? And I guess what made you decide to tackle the whole situation?
Well, it's an interesting story for sure. I think it's important that people in the UFO community understand that not everything out there that's said is true. And we have to kind of like protect our minds from these viruses that could spread and become more prevalent than the greater truth that we're all trying to get to the bottom of. And, this story is surrounded by harassment and false claims, and all that stuff still happens. So what more timely a story than this as a cautionary tale for the future or the present that we're currently living? There's so many more important stories that should have been covered during that time, and this really, it took over. It was like the big headline show at Contact in the Desert, which pretty sure I'm not invited back. I don't know about you, but after this series has come out, things have gotten pretty quiet over there. That's just the way it goes. People become really, really popular really quickly when they say super sensational stuff with literally no facts to back them. And I think that's very troublesome, especially when we've come far. I'd say we have come pretty far in terms of this subject's credibility in the mainstream. There's still a lot to uncover to really get down to the bottom of the truth. But when this type of stuff keeps popping up in the community, it's not taking us further. I think it's just setting us back. And we'll allow this thing to be a ridiculed subject going forward. We really want to keep it scientific, factual, court of law type stuff. Let's really prove this to the world. That's what
right.
I'm focused on.
Yeah, I like that. So I just have to tell you one thing. And I'm not going to get into details, but I'll just tell you, I was at a conference, and it was a very well attended conference. And there was a speaker and some people that got up and spoke. The story was so wacko and out there. That's all I can that's all I'm going to get into it, because I don't want to name any names or anything like that. But it was completely wacky. And I made myself sit there all the way through it, because I just wanted to see what makes these people tick, and what else were they fantastical were they going to say. They got a standing ovation at the end. It was about as far out as you could possibly go, and they got a standing ovation. And at that conference, there's some really good speakers about some really good UFO encounters and things like that. No one else got a standing ovation. But so it kind of, people, I think it has to do possibly with, people want to maybe escape reality a little bit. Maybe
Oh,
that's,
totally.
and I get that. I understand it. We've got a harsh world here, and it's hard to face things every day, and maybe that's part of it. I don't know.
Yeah, there's all kinds of reasons people get attracted more so to the wacky woo rather than the, more boring factual stories that are coming out of this phenomenon and the community. Some of them are just people like to be entertained. They want to escape from the reality that we're living. Other things are that they might have been affected by something similar. Like maybe they had an experience very similar. And that's where folks like this kind of dominate. They know that there's certain stories that are popular in the community. They know that there's a following of this type of thing. So they create their whole story around those things that are hot.
Yeah, I believe it.
And then when they present it, it takes off because people are like, wow, like that's actually what I kind of went through, right? So there's always like almost a kernel of truth.
Yeah.
That these lies can be based off of. And that's why they go so far.
Now, as far as Wilcock and Corey Good, where are they now?
Wilcock has the show he does every Sunday, and it's huge.
I'm glad I don't know that.
He's got like 500,000-ish subscribers and makes like thousands in super chats every Sunday. And he's recently released a book claiming that he channels Archangel Michael.
Oh, good.
Yep. And Corey is currently embroiled he set up all these lawsuits against people that worked with him at one point. And the final lawsuit is this April, scheduled in Colorado between him and Gaia Entertainment, because he claims that all of the stuff he presented on at Gaia is his intellectual property, which is...
that's what the suit is about?
Yeah, he's saying like the bird people, the secret space stuff he's talking about, and, the Sphere Coalition, all these sort of names are in that lawsuit document. You can look it up. And he's saying like, Gaia made all this money off of that, and they're still doing series talking with new people that are saying that they experienced the same thing, 20 years in the future, and then their bodies being Benjamin buttoned back to a earlier version or something, and he lives out his life here in that body, but he remembers the space battles with aliens and all this stuff. That is his intellectual property, and if Gaia made all this money off of it, he should be given his fair share.
What is Gaia?
Gaia Entertainment Gaia TV is a entertainment streaming network that focuses on very new age, spiritual / UFO conspiracy and esoteric metaphysical content. And, they started, Jay Widener, we interviewed for this series. He was the former head of production there. He took them from being this like entertainment startup to, millions of subscribers per year, kind of like a miniature Netflix for that type of content. And so that's how these guys got so big so quick, because they had all these, Gaia has a huge following, not only on their paid for streaming service, but on like YouTube and all these other streaming platforms that they can put out their content. So these guys got a huge step up right away, and then they were doing conferences that also blew them up. So that's why that story became so prevalent in the UFO community, and there were people that I think you haven't seen the second episode yet, have you?
No.
So Richard Dolan's in that one. It's an archival clip that I licensed from MUFON from Ron James. Ron had put together a conference in 2017 to have a panel of all these basically Gaia secret space program people. And Corey was up there, Andrew Basiago, Michael Sala, and one of these insiders that was used quite heavily by Corey Good, David Wilcock, and Gaia at the time, William Tompkins. He was like 90 plus years old at the time. And he was saying that we had a reptilian space program where the reptilians gave us craft and yada, yada, yada. You know, interesting tales, but no proof, right? And Rich, he checked them at this conference and basically said, you know, I don't believe any of it. And I thought this was a real UFO investigation group, MUFON. I thought it was a serious group, and I don't know why we're hosting something with these people. It was pretty interesting in terms of the history of other prominent researchers in the UFO community that were pushing back against this growing wave of disinformation and, for lack of a better explanation, entertainment. You know, because a lot of this is UFO-tainment, right? People, like you said, people go to conferences and they get these standing ovations because it's entertaining more than anything. But people kind of lose that logic and deductive reasoning when they're sitting in an audience and they're connected to something similar to that story. They just go, wow, you know?
And it's like a collective situation too. People in a group, you know?
Yeah, you know, I'll clap too. Oh, I'm getting excited too. You know, it's all part of that group psychology. But
now, has Gaia put out anything that's really solid that we know about? I mean, I always think of people that are first getting into this and, you know, try to steer them, you know, in the right direction. I mean, are there things that are really solid, or is it just entertainment?
I do not subscribe. I know that they've had whole shows based around Rick Doty, Dr. Stephen Greer. They've had whole shows around, you know, back in the day, Richard Dolan did stuff for them. They don't have him back anymore. But, you know, that's also something Jay talks about in the series, that he started off with people like Rupert Sheldrake, you know, trying to think of the prominent sociologist. His name will come to me, but like, you know, just very credible, well-studied people. And then it started going into the Corey Good sort of, you know, check your facts at the door type productions. And Jay didn't like that. He wanted to get it back on track towards other more credible stuff. And it just kind of went off the rails. And I don't know where they're at now, but I don't know. They probably don't like that I made this documentary. I don't know how they feel about it.
Oh, I'm sure they wouldn't be too happy about it. Yeah. I mean, but, you know, I mean, it's good to, I think, you know, some people may disagree with me, but I think it's good to call people out because, you know, a lot of people contact me actually looking for guidance. Like, you know, hey, you know, should I look on YouTube for, I'm interested in this topic. Where should I go? You know, that type of thing. And so that wouldn't be a place that I normally would tell them to look. You know, third phase of the moon, I wouldn't tell them to look there. There's a few other places like that I would say, you know, it's not a good idea to look at these, you know, and think that what we're seeing is real. especially now with the CGI and so many different ways, AI and ways to make images and videos so easily right now. It's, most people figure they have a kind of a signature to them and they can figure out that they're fake, but people believe a lot of stuff of what they see and read out there. So it's really, it's a difficult place to be if you're really looking for information.
Totally.
Yeah. I don't think it's going to get a lot easier, but we're toward the end of the show. So where can someone find you and all your things you're out there? Easiest way.
My films are on Amazon Prime, Tubi TV, Roku. These 2 docu-series, I believe, are on Roku. Some of them are on YouTube Movies, which is like a free with ads platform now. They've got like 182 million subscribers, and I'm up there with a bunch of other films. You can search my name, Darcy Weir, on some of these platforms, and you'll see my catalog. Or you can go to my website here, Occult Journeys. Check out some of my trailers and films there. I have a show weekly on KGRA on
that's
Twitter.
Right. Been on there. Yeah.
Yeah, at Occult Journeys. You can find me on Twitter and add me there. And the show that we do, we bring on different guests every week. You've been on, definitely come back. And we talk about current events, current news regarding UFOs. There seems to be something new every single week, of the year now. So
and we're totally out of time. I'm sorry to cut it short, but we are out of time. And we'll be back next week with a Marine, Bill Carter, William Carter. Quite a story. I'm really looking forward to that. Thank you, everyone. See you next week. And remember to keep your eyes to the sky.